On this episode of the History Roadshow, we visit Ashby-de-la-Zouch Castle. A manor had existed at Ashby-de-la-Zouch from at least 1086. The lands were acquired by Robert de Beaumont, the Count of Meulan and later Earl of Leicester, in 1100. He established the Belmese family there as his tenants, and after the Belmese family line died out in 1160, the Earls of Leicester reassigned the estate to the La Zouch family, from whom the manor took its later name. The La Zouch line died out in 1399, leaving the inheritance of the family estates uncertain. The manor probably passed to Sir Hugh Bernal and, or around 1420, on to James Butler, the Earl of Ormond and Wiltshire. Constructed on the site of the older manor house, with two large towers and various small buildings, Ashby-de-la-Zouch Castle today is a ruined fortification. It was built by William Lord Hastings, a favourite of Edward IV, after 1473, and it was accompanied by the creation of a 3,000-acre park. In 1474, Edward granted William the right to fortify his manors. William set about developing the old manorial complex at Ashby-de-la-Zouch with new buildings. His intent appears to have been to construct a substantial castle, similar to the royal fortifications at Tutbury and Nottingham. Work appears to have already started on the site the year before permission was formally given, although it is uncertain whether this referred to the construction of the castle's chapel, or if William had already begun work on the first tower, gambling that the king would subsequently approve it. Edward IV died in 1483, leaving the kingdom to his young son Edward V, but his uncle Richard, Duke of Gloucester, had his own ambitions for the throne. Lord Hastings was unwilling to support the deposition of Edward V, and as a consequence Richard executed him that June, ahead of his own coronation. This left Ashby-de-la-Zouch Castle only partially completed. The War of the Roses broke out in England during 1455 between the rival supporters of the Lancastrian and Yorkist factions. James Butler, who owned the estate, was a Lancastrian. He was captured at the Battle of Towton by the Yorkist leader Edward IV in 1461 and executed. The Crown seized his estates, including the then manor of Ashby-de-la-Zouch. In the 16th century, Edward Hastings and then his son George took over control of the estate. George was a favourite of Henry VIII, and so much so he was made the Earl of Huntingdon in 1529, which led him to rebuilding parts of the castle in brick and redesigning the gardens. In 1642, the English Civil War broke out between the supporters of Charles I and Parliament. The castle was strategically well placed, linking the royalist territories in the north and west of England and giving easy access to the River Trent. The castle was a main base of operations across the region. Buildings in the town of Ashby-de-la-Zouch were pulled down to provide material to refortify the castle, and escape tunnels were dug. Henry, who was a key royalist commander in the Midlands and Henry Hastings' youngest son, returned to the castle from Leicester in September 1644, where another 600 royalist soldiers soon joined him and its 60-man garrison. After an outbreak of the plague, Parliament began to raid the town again. The cause looked lost, but after many discussions he agreed to the surrender of the castle on good terms. This was achieved in February 1646 and allowed for the release of himself, the garrison and their weapons. In 1648, William Bainbridge was ordered to slight the castle to put it beyond military use. He carried out his orders immediately, demolishing one side of the Great Tower and the Kitchen Tower, undermining the foundations and deploying gunpowder charges. One can only imagine just how magnificent this castle would have looked in its heyday, and what we see now is a shell of its former self, but its history is rich and significant. Why not discover yourself this prominent architectural treasure of Ashby-de-la-Zouch Castle?